Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099, and it is Monday. I wasn't originally planning to review what I'm about to review for you, and then I realized, oh, I don't have a video for Monday. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go ahead and film this video against my better judgment, but I want to go ahead and shoot you guys a little warning real quick. I am working on something huge for you guys. If you saw my 2-hour and 10-minute Star Wars video that I put up on May 4th of this year, I am working on something very similar to that I would like to go up in approximately 3-ish weeks. It's not done yet. I've recorded it all. I still have about a little over an hour of it to edit. So that is going to take time that ordinarily I would be putting toward making other videos for you guys. Hence, you will be seeing fewer videos from me in between now and roughly 3-ish weeks from now. Maybe I will be done with it sooner, but I took a bit of a break from it yesterday, and so far I haven't worked on any today because I'm about to do a review for you, which I remind you I did not want to do this video, and in a minute I will tell you why. Today I am reviewing a book, Superman, The Coming of Atlas. This is written by James Robinson, who, if you've ever heard of the 1990s comic book Starman, which everyone and their mom really loves, I have not read very much of Starman. This guy wrote Starman. This is also written by a gentleman named, I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce this, Renato Guedes. You know, I don't even know if that's a gentleman or a lady. Could be a lady. If it is, I'm very sorry, ma'am. I don't know. There's covers here by Alex Ross. That's, if I'm being honest, that Alex Ross cover is kind of what made me interested in this. But as I've said a few times since the Man of Steel movie came out, before that movie, I was only a very, very casual fan of Superman. I really liked the character a lot, but I usually had a lot of trouble getting into his stories. Usually I would read one and I would say, I like that a lot, this isn't working for me. And that seemed to happen with just about every Superman story that I read and owned. Then seeing the Man of Steel movie, I kind of got a fire lit under me. I was like, I need to read more Superman, see what all's out there. And I've read a few more books since that movie came out. This book is one of them, and now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it. Whether you realize it or not, basically every story under the sun follows a certain structure. You have a main character, they're going through some sort of moral or lesson or change over the course of that story, and then by the end of the story you can kind of in your mind map out the change that that character went through. That's usually called a character arc. And as a reviewer, I tend to look at books and their success or failure based on that character arc and the execution of the character arc. So in the case of The Coming of Atlas, where I'm going to have to say there really is no character arc for any of our characters, I'm going to have to say the book fails because it doesn't deliver what is a very basic element of storytelling. Even rudimentary children's stories that not a lot of people really think are very complex, even those stories will follow this very basic structure of, hey, you have a main character. He acts in a certain way at the beginning of the story. Then by the end of the story, the plot has changed him in some way, and now he acts just a little bit differently. The character arc doesn't have to change your character fundamentally to their very core, although depending on the scope of the story and the length of the story, it may do that. But they just have to go through some kind of change, maybe a small change. And when you're dealing with characters like Superman, who has been around since 1938, you're going to have to be careful what you change and what you keep static. Because, well, this character's been around since before you were born, and long after you're dead, this character is still going to be around in other stories. So you want to leave this character in a place where people can look at it and they can say, okay, I can see what the story arc was that James Robinson did in the Coming of Atlas storyline, but you don't want to do something that will change the character so fundamentally hard that when you're done with the character, it doesn't even resemble Superman, and it makes telling stories about Superman that much harder. Yeah, I know, it's a fine line to walk, but plenty of other authors have done it before, and honestly, I don't think it would have been that hard for James Robinson to do it, especially when, if you've been on the internet for about 3 minutes, you could probably throw a stone a short distance and you would find somebody who just loves to talk about James Robinson's talent as a writer in regards to Starman and other books. What exactly was the failure of The Coming of Atlas? Well, like I kind of hinted at, there really is no character arc here. Let me quickly explain to you what all happens in this book. You've got this guy named Atlas. That's him right there. Atlas is this mythological figure from the past. He isn't really the Atlas from Greek mythology. As it turns out, in the 1970s, Jack Kirby, who, if you haven't heard of him, he's awesome, and I kind of envy you because you're probably going to want to go Google Jack Kirby and find out all of the stuff that he's done in comic books, and you're going to be like, wow, all of that came from one head. Anyway, Jack Kirby created this character called Atlas, who, compared to some of the other things that he created, is kind of a small character that, up until about a week ago, I didn't even know who this was. So Atlas is basically kind of like Conan the Barbarian. He lives in a kind of vague, unidentified past that didn't exist historically, and he's super strong. We don't really know why, but the first and only appearance of Atlas prior to this Superman storyline is reprinted in this book. So if you want to know about Atlas, you can read that comic book. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to say that the Atlas that appears in this Superman storyline doesn't really bear a whole lot of resemblance to the character that Jack Kirby was creating in that story that appears in this book. Now, in James Robinson's defense, I will go ahead and say that there isn't much of a character to Atlas in that Jack Kirby storyline, so any author could have come along and taken this very basic character that doesn't have a whole lot of personality or backstory, and they could have added a lot of personality and backstory. It wouldn't have been very hard, and quite often some of my favorite writers do that. They take a very boring or bland character, and they add dimension and personality to that character, and that's really great, and I love it when they try to do that. Unfortunately, I just don't see that that's what James Robinson is doing, because I don't see Atlas as having very much of a personality in the Superman comics either. Unfortunately, I think that James Robinson is giving more away about Atlas in the foreword for this book than he does in the actual story. In the foreword, James Robinson compares his version of Atlas to Namor from Marvel Comics. He says that Namor is the kind of guy who skirts the line between bad guy and good guy, but at the end of the day, he kind of lands on the good guy side. He said that Atlas is the same way. He skirts the line between bad guy and good guy, but at the end of the day, he's going to fall on the bad guy side. And that's kind of an interesting character idea, I guess. Unfortunately, in the 4 Superman issues that are reprinted in this book, I don't really get a sense of that at all. In fact, I don't really get a sense of a whole lot of anything, since this book is mostly just a fight with Atlas. Now you might say, what's wrong with that? A fight scene isn't that bad. Well, sure, no, there's nothing wrong with a fight scene, but if it's going to take the better part of 3 issues for the fight to happen, I'd kind of like there to be something else going on. For example, I'm not a gigantic fan of the storyline called The Death of Superman, where, you guessed it, Superman died. In fact, there's not really a whole lot of meat to that story. It's just Superman fighting Doomsday. But that story was followed up by 2 other stories that I thought were very good: World Without a Superman and The Reign of the Supermen. Both of those stories are excellent, and they have a whole lot of meat to them, and you kind of had to have the 4-issue fight scene with Doomsday to get that story. Here, I don't really see this fight with Atlas actually leading to much of anything. Or if it does, since this is the beginning of James Robinson's somewhat lengthy run on Superman, maybe it is going to lead to something, but since I only have this book, The Coming of Atlas, from James Robinson's run, I can't tell what the story might be, and it's not really my fault if I don't have all of James Robinson's run, and I can't tell where the story might be going. Just in the context of this book, I'm going to have to say there really isn't a story. You've got this guy Atlas. He was somehow either pulled toward the future or he was pushed from the past by an ally of his, and long story short, he ends up in the present day. This secret, shady government organization kidnaps him. They teach him English, and then they want him to go and fight and or kill Superman. Basically, he just wants to kill Superman because he was getting bored fighting all the stuff in ancient wherever he's from. And there, I guess, comes the part where James Robinson says he skirts the line between being a good guy and a bad guy, but he lands on the bad guy's side. Now, I can totally see that he's a bad guy because he wants to kill Superman. I can't at all really see him skirting the line, because anyone who just wants to kill Superman for no real reason at all other than I want to take over the world, I can't really see them as being skirting the line to good guy's side. I'm just seeing a bad guy here. Now, we don't know who this shady organization is. We don't know anyone who works there. Then we get what I think is a separate government organization, and we find out that Lana Lang is working here, and this organization is run by Lex Luthor. And basically, Lana Lang is in charge of dispatching a group of science police officers, and their job is to clean up after Superman. We first see them fighting some giant monster, then Atlas comes from out of nowhere and kills the monster, and then he either kills or maims or brutally injures most of the science police officers. Then when Lana says that she's going to help Superman, a hologram of Lex Luthor appears out of nowhere and says, anyone in this city who tries to help Superman, if they work for me, they don't anymore, and I'm going to try and make sure they never work again. So basically, Lex Luthor is a petty child, which in some versions of the Superman story, that's what he is. In other stories that I like a little bit more, he's a little bit more complex than just being a petty child. Here, he's a petty child. Now, I don't actually think that Lana Lang has to be in the adult Superman stories, since basically when Lana Lang was first created, Superman had already been a thing, Lois Lane was already a thing in the adult Superman status quo, and then other writers were saying, well, we're going to create the adventures of Superboy, Superman when he was a kid, and they basically created Lana Lang, who is just a proxy for Lois Lane. So essentially, Lana doesn't really have a personality independent of her own. She's just kind of a copy of Lois Lane, who was created to kind of stand in for Lois as Superman was not yet working at the Daily Planet and he didn't know Lois, so they created this brand new character to basically serve the same function as Lois Lane. So anyway, if you're going to do a story where Clark Kent is a teenager living in Smallville, then I guess I'm okay with Lana Lang being part of that story. But let me go ahead and say that in all of my years of reading and watching Superman stuff, I've never seen Lana Lang actually serve a purpose other than being that girl that Clark likes. So I'm not really down with Lana Lang coming into the story and being an agent of Lex Luthor's Science Police Corps or whatever it is. Now, I do think that's a kind of neat idea, and when we were seeing Control from the back, I didn't know who it was. So when we find out that it's Lana Lang, I was surprised. But I don't really think that we have to dredge up this kind of embarrassing non-character from Superman's past and use her in the present day stories, because we already have a Lois Lane, so we don't need Lois Lane light in the form of Lana Lang. So anyway, I haven't really talked a whole lot about Superman. This story begins with Superman, Hal Jordan, who is the main Green Lantern of Earth, and Krypto, Superman's dog from Krypton. They're all playing Frisbee out in the middle of space. And Superman is acting like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And Green Lantern's like, no, man, this is really weird and creepy. And it kind of escalates into this almost argument. And I guess now is as good of a time as any to say that the dialogue in this book is some of the worst I have ever read in my entire life. I'm not going to cite any specific examples because I would have to open the book and find some examples, and I don't want this video to just be me reading a Superman book to you. But know that usually I'm not really the kind of guy who says this dialogue is weird or this character's voice sounds a little bit off. But this book consistently, all of the characters just seem really weird and they talk very oddly. Like, why does Superman start talking about all the exotic alien women that Green Lantern has found? And how is this in any way related to Superman playing Frisbee with his dog? It just seems really weird and it doesn't really fit very well into the rest of the story. Then you get a weird scene of Lois Lane complaining that Superman wants him and Lois to go watch Zatanna's magic show, and that kind of ends in a really weird place, and I don't really understand why we have that scene. And then we have another scene where Lois is complaining that Krypto is a bad dog and he doesn't belong on Earth, and then we have like 3 issues of Superman fighting Atlas. Very briefly, Supergirl tries to help Superman. That doesn't work. Then Krypto comes to his rescue, and he actually seems to be doing better at protecting Superman than Superman himself, and then Superman goes and finds Zatanna's cousin, Zachary Zatara, and Zatara casts a spell on Superman, and Superman is able to go beat Atlas. The end. Like I said, there's not really a whole lot of substance to this story. Just about everything that we see here, I get the feeling is going to be picked up on in a later story. And, well, maybe that later story will make this story make a lot more sense. But that's not my problem. I don't have that later story. All I have is the coming of Atlas. And I can't help but think of the proverb, any comic book is someone's first comic book. And that's sort of true in this case. This was my first experience with James Robinson's Superman, and I can't really think of any reason that I should tell you to go and read this, and I can't think of any reason that I myself should keep reading his run, because he really disappointed me with his 4-issue opening of this run. Now, as it turns out, I am going to be reading another storyline from James Robinson's run called Codename Super Patriot. I don't know if that picks up some of the subplots that this storyline introduced. I'm assuming we're going to find out a little bit more of the first shady organization that pulled Atlas from the time stream. Maybe. But, like I say, I really shouldn't have to rely on a later story to make this story make more sense. If you're going to pay even cover price for this book, then you're probably going to want a complete story that satisfies you in some way until you get the next storyline. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that this book does not satisfy me, at least. Maybe it satisfies you, but I kind of doubt it. Overall, I was really disappointed in this book. I don't think I can think of anything worthwhile about it. I did really enjoy the Atlas comic book by Jack Kirby at the end. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say that you should buy this book specifically for that reprinted comic book. And also, if you do enjoy that Atlas comic book, sadly, that's really all there is. For whatever reason, Jack Kirby did not do a second story with Atlas, so if you read that and you're thinking, okay, what's left? Well, that's basically it. Now, James Robinson does supply a few flashbacks, if you will, that kind of connects Atlas's appearance in the modern-day Superman comic with Atlas's appearance in Jack Kirby's Atlas comic, but those aren't really enough to make me say that, yeah, this book is good. Now, if James Robinson had wanted to do a full-on Atlas solo series that maybe picks up where Jack Kirby left off, I think that would have been really cool. Now, I'm not sure if a lot of people would have read that because, well, Superman's name sells, and I don't know if I would have bought an Atlas comic book by James Robinson, a guy who I've had very limited experiences reading his stuff with, but I think maybe that would have been a little bit less disappointing than what we got here. And that brings me just about full circle. If you've watched this entire video, you might be wondering, why did you not want to do this video in the first place? You said that at the beginning of your video. And that's true, I did say that. And the reason that I didn't really want to do this video, but I initially gave in to my instincts, is because I don't like being the guy who comes in and says, this comic book is awful. But, like I said, I wanted to put out a video because I wasn't sure if I would be putting out a whole lot of videos this week because I'm working on another video, so I wanted to put out something. Unfortunately, this review is very negative, and I want to be able to be that guy who puts out positive reviews. Remember when I reviewed Superman Unconventional Warfare by Greg Rucka? I really enjoyed that book, and I want to read more of Greg Rucka's Superman run. And now, here I am basically in the exact opposite position where I have James Robinson's The Coming of Atlas, and I did not enjoy this. This was easily one of the worst Superman books I've ever read, and I don't really like being the guy to tell you that. Now, I'm not saying that I have a lot of clout here, and that my opinion can change the minds and hearts of everyone. I'm not saying that, but I do like to try and put out a positive opinion, I guess you could say, of the things that I read and watch. And if I do read something that I hate viciously, I don't have to do a video on it. Although in this case, I did do a video so that I knew I would have at least one video to satisfy you if you come to my channel to be satisfied. I'm rambling, so I'm going to go ahead and close off the video right around here-ish. I hope that you enjoyed my thoughts and words on Superman The Coming of Atlas, and I hope that if you did, you will like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I will be back sometime soonish with another video. Until then, I'll see you cats and kittens later. Have a good day.